The ring felt heavier than it should have. Willie stood barefoot at the edge of the infinity pool, sunlight brushing his skin as warm Caribbean waves whispered in the distance. The view stretched endlessly, turquoise water blending into a cloudless sky, a perfect backdrop for a moment he'd spent months imagining. In his hand, a sleek black box. Inside it, a delicate engagement ring with a single round diamond, simple and elegant, just like Brianna. It had taken 3 jewelers, 2 rewrites of the proposal speech, and 6 months of saving to make this day happen. This was it. The beginning of forever. Willie smiled to himself as he pictured her face, the surprise, the tears, the way she'd throw her arms around him, laughing. She'd said once she never wanted a big scene, just something private and meaningful. That's why he chose this resort. That's why he kept the whole trip a surprise. A soft breeze kissed his face. He glanced toward their suite, tucked away just behind the palm trees and shaded cabanas. The sun was dipping. Any minute now, she'd walk out here. And everything would change. Except, it already had. It was supposed to be perfect. Willie had planned every second. The room had a panoramic ocean view. Private butler. A spa menu with things he couldn't even pronounce. And he didn't care, because this wasn't about luxury. It was about her. About celebrating their 4 years together. He thought this would fix things. They'd been off lately, Brianna had grown distant, distracted. Always texting. Always tired. He chalked it up to work stress, seasonal burnout, maybe hormones. That's what you do when you love someone, you give them grace. And this vacation was his way of showing her, I'm still here. I still believe in us. They landed 3 days ago. The first night was good. Champagne, music, even a few laughs. But the second day? She barely touched her food. Hardly looked him in the eye. Spent more time facing her phone than the ocean. Today, he had a snorkeling trip planned. She said she wasn't feeling great and wanted to stay back at the suite. He didn't argue. Gave her a forehead kiss, told her to rest, and left. But 20 minutes in, something didn't sit right. So he came back early. Quietly. No footsteps. No knocking. Just concern in his heart. That's when he heard it, voices. A laugh. Not hers. His. And then her voice, that playful, breathy tone he hadn't heard in weeks. The door wasn't even locked. He stepped inside and saw what no man ever wants to see. Sheets tangled. Clothes on the floor. Her legs wrapped around a young, shirtless man in resort staff shorts. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She laughed. A short, shocked, ridiculous laugh. Willie, this isn't what it looks like. But it was. And it broke him in half. If this hit home, drop a 1 in the comments. Thank you for being part of this story. For every man who's been played, betrayed, and still found a way to stand tall, this is for you. Subscribe for more true stories with grit and growth. Comment below, what would you have done in Willie's shoes? Share this if someone needs to be reminded of their worth. Dinners. Proposal ring detail. ChatGPT said. Willie always believed in structure. Maybe it came from growing up in a house where chaos was the norm, dad gone, mom always working doubles, dinner usually whatever he could microwave himself. He learned young that no one was coming to fix your life for you. So he fixed his. One piece at a time. Now, at 35, Willie was the kind of man who paid bills before they were due, booked dentist appointments 6 months ahead, and never missed leg day. He wasn't flashy. Didn't care much for the newest phones or expensive watches. But he had a stable career as a software consultant in Austin, owned a condo downtown, and could finally afford the kind of life he'd once only dreamed about. He didn't date recklessly either. Never had. He was the guy who remembered birthdays, planned thoughtful dates, texted back fast, and showed up early. For him, love wasn't about chasing butterflies. It was about building something that could last. That's why, when he met Brianna 4 years ago at a design conference, he didn't waste time. She was clever, beautiful in a low-maintenance kind of way, and sharp with her humor. She had a quick mind and a quicker wit. She called his t-shirts boring and his Spotify playlist algorithm-approved oatmeal, and he'd fallen harder every time she teased him. At 32, Brianna had that magnetic, independent energy that made people turn when she walked into a room. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, had clients in multiple states, and could flip between talking fonts and color palettes to ranting about the ethics of brand manipulation in modern advertising. She wore thrifted dresses and never the same lipstick twice. But in the last few months, something had shifted. She wasn't cruel, just distant. Absent in the way people are when their minds are somewhere else. Texts went unanswered for longer. Calls ended quicker. She used to send him memes and reels constantly, little thinking of you things. But those stopped coming. And when they were together, her phone was always face down but buzzing. Willie noticed, of course. He wasn't naive. But he figured everyone goes through quiet patches. She said work was overwhelming. Her mom had been sick. She needed space. And because he wasn't the guy to smother, he gave her that space. But deep down, the silence was starting to feel like a warning. So he planned the trip. Turks and Caicos. 5 nights at a luxury resort with a private oceanfront villa, full spa access, and a schedule filled with sunset dinners, island excursions, and nothing but time together. It cost more than he was comfortable spending, but he didn't care. This was more than a vacation, this was a reset. A chance to remind her who they were. Who they still could be. He picked out the ring himself. Classic solitaire. Thin gold band. Understated, just like she liked. It came in a dark leather box that snapped shut with the kind of soft click that made your heart jump. He carried it with him everywhere, waiting for the perfect moment. Not too public. Not staged. Just her, him, and the sound of the waves. It was going to be unforgettable. Just not in the way he'd imagined. It started with small things, delays in replies, the quiet space between text bubbles. The playful voice notes she used to send during his lunch break turned into curt, lowercase k replies. Calls at night felt shorter, distracted, like she was trying to multitask something she didn't want to admit. She stopped asking about his day. And when he asked about hers, the answers got vaguer. Busy. Just tired. Nothing worth talking about. Willie noticed how her tone shifted when he mentioned anything involving the future, weekend plans, meeting his sister, even casual talk about adopting a dog. She used to light up at that stuff. Now, she changed the subject. Or suddenly had to jump on a call. One night, lying next to each other in his bed, she turned away to scroll her phone. He leaned in to kiss her shoulder and she flinched, not much, not dramatically, but just enough for it to feel like he wasn't welcome there anymore. He told himself she was just going through something. People don't stay 100% connected every second. Maybe she needed time. Space. But the truth was, it felt like she was already halfway out the door. And that scared him more than he could admit. Still, he didn't confront her. Didn't accuse. Instead, he doubled down on trying to fix it. He cleaned up his schedule. Prioritized more FaceTime. Started cooking again on the nights they stayed in, her favorite, spicy shrimp pasta with lemon and garlic, and the salad she always said she hated but always finished. When she seemed unimpressed, he made the decision that felt like his last card to play. The trip. It would be perfect. The two of them, cut off from emails, notifications, the buzzing world of stress. Just sun, sand, a suite with its own plunge pool, and all the time they needed to fall back into rhythm. He rehearsed it all in his head, the first dinner on the beach, the lazy mornings, the moment he'd take her hand, pull out the ring, and tell her he still believed in them. He didn't want to be the guy who gave up at the first sign of tension. He wanted to fight for her, for what they'd built. Because love wasn't just about the good days, it was about choosing each other, especially when things got messy. So when her tone was cold the morning of their flight, he ignored it. When she didn't hold his hand on the plane, he blamed turbulence. When she barely smiled at the welcome drinks at the resort, he thought maybe she just needed a nap. He told himself it would all change by tomorrow. One perfect day, that's all it would take. He had no idea that by tomorrow, everything would be destroyed. By day 3, the air between them felt thinner than it should have. The island was stunning, clear skies, soft white sand, the kind of silence money buys. But Brianna moved through it like she was somewhere else entirely. She didn't want to go paddleboarding. Said her stomach was off. Passed on the couple's massage. Claimed the sun was giving her a headache. That morning, Willie had a snorkeling excursion lined up. She mumbled something about not sleeping well, rolled over, and buried her face into the pillow. "I think I'm gonna skip it," she said, voice muffled. "I just want to chill at the room for a bit." Willie leaned down and brushed a kiss onto her temple. "Okay. Get some rest. I'll bring you back a coconut water." She nodded, already pulling the sheet up to her shoulder. Out by the docks, he geared up with a handful of other tourists and tried to shake the uneasy feeling that had been clinging to him since the night before. But halfway through the ride out to the reef, his chest felt tight. Not panicked. Just wrong. Like he'd forgotten something important. Or was about to. He faked a headache, apologized to the instructor, and hopped off the boat before the group reached the dive site. He walked back from the shoreline with a chilled coconut in one hand and a small flower he'd picked from the path in the other, thinking she'd smile when he handed it to her. Thinking maybe today was the day the fog would lift between them. He didn't text. He didn't knock. He wanted the moment to be sweet, unscripted. Something she'd remember. The room key clicked, and as he pushed open the door, soft music drifted through the air, upbeat, relaxed, not something she usually played. Then came the sound of laughter. Not hers. Not alone. A man's voice, low, cocky. The kind of voice that had nothing to do with work calls or friends FaceTiming. Willie froze in the entryway. His heart didn't pound. It dropped, slow and heavy, into the pit of his stomach. The bedroom door was open. He stepped forward. The scene hit him like a car crash in slow motion. The bed was messy, sheets pulled halfway off the mattress. Brianna was there, naked, her bare legs tangled with someone else's. A man, maybe mid-20s, tan skin, chiseled, wearing resort staff swim trunks crumpled near the foot of the bed. Her back was arched in surprise, mouth half open, her hands scrambling for the sheet. The guy turned fast, fumbling for his clothes like a guilty teenager caught by a dad with a shotgun. No one said a word. Then Brianna laughed. A light, absurd, out-of-place laugh. "Willie, oh my God, this isn't what it looks like." Willie blinked. She pulled the sheet up, still breathless, eyes wide but not ashamed, just annoyed at being caught. "It's not serious," she said quickly. "It was just stupid. A mistake." The guy muttered, "I thought you said he was gone all day," as he grabbed his shirt and bolted out past Willie, avoiding eye contact completely. Willie didn't follow him. Didn't scream. Didn't shout. Didn't even breathe for a second. He just stood there. Watching Brianna, watching this person he thought he knew reach for excuses like they were pillows she could hide under. But nothing she said would cover this. Nothing would. Brianna kept adjusting the sheet around her chest, as if the fabric could somehow wrap up the damage she'd just done. She sat up slowly, her hair a mess, flushed and breathing harder than the moment called for. She tried to smile. God, she actually smiled. "It's not what it looks like," she said again, as if saying it twice might make it believable. "Willie. He just came by to drop something off." And one thing led to another. "I don't even know his name." She laughed again, soft and awkward, like this was just some stupid sitcom misunderstanding. He stared at her. Not moving. Not blinking. Not trusting himself to speak. She reached for her phone, probably out of habit, maybe trying to deflect, maybe to check if anyone else knew. Her fingers fumbled at the lock screen like she didn't even know why she'd grabbed it. I was going to tell you. It was just dumb. A moment. It doesn't mean anything. Willie took a step back and looked around the room. Their room. The same room where he'd left the ring box tucked in the nightstand drawer. The same room where he'd imagined her saying yes, maybe crying a little, and hugging him so tight it'd make the world fade. Now the only thing that faded was the illusion. She kept talking, half defensive, half pleading. Willie, can we just talk about this later? Please? You caught me off guard. This wasn't planned. I swear. Can you just give me a minute to explain? He finally moved, walked past the foot of the bed, opened the closet, and started pulling out his suitcase. What are you doing? She asked, voice cracking with something between anger and disbelief. Packing, he said simply, folding shirts with calm, mechanical precision. You're seriously leaving? Don't be ridiculous. We have 3 more nights here. She stood, still wrapped in the sheet, still trying to take control of the moment. You're gonna throw away this entire trip over one mistake? Willie didn't look up. It's not like we're married or anything, she muttered under her breath. That stopped him. Slowly, he zipped the suitcase and turned to face her fully for the first time. You're right, he said, voice calm, almost gentle. We're not married. He picked up his watch, slid it over his wrist. And that, he said, looking her straight in the eye, makes this a whole lot easier. Her face shifted, from smug, to defensive, to something closer to panic. Wait. Willie, come on. Please. I messed up. I know I did. But we can talk about this. Please, don't just walk out like this. He shook his head, stepped around her, and opened the door. She didn't understand it yet. But she would. The suitcase rolled smoothly over the polished tile as Willie walked through the resort's main corridor. The warm island air brushed against his face, thick with the scent of salt and hibiscus, but he didn't feel it. Didn't hear the birds. Didn't notice the sun beginning to dip below the horizon. He just moved. Past the spa. Past the bar where he'd made dinner reservations for that night. Past the little boutique where she'd tried on straw hats and laughed, just 2 days ago, like everything between them was untouched. He stepped into the cool, marbled lobby and approached the front desk. The concierge, dressed in crisp white linen, smiled politely. Good evening, Mr. Warren. Is everything all right? Willie kept his voice steady. I need to check out. Now. The concierge blinked. Of course, sir. May I ask, is there a problem we can help resolve? No, he said. Just a change of plans. She nodded and began typing. You're scheduled through Friday, 3 more nights. I should inform you that early checkouts may be subject to cancellation fees. I'll pay whatever it takes, he replied without hesitation. Just close the reservation under my name. Understood. A few more clicks. And what about the other guest? Ms. Brianna Mercer? He exhaled, slow and quiet. She'll be making her own arrangements. The concierge hesitated just a moment, long enough to understand something had gone wrong, but remained professional. Very well. The suite will remain accessible to her until standard checkout tomorrow unless she extends her stay with a new payment method. Willie nodded once. She won't. One more thing, sir, the concierge added, glancing at her monitor. The pre-booked spa sessions and excursions were all under your name. Would you like those canceled as well? Yes. All of it. Cancel and refund whatever you can. She gave a polite smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes this time. She knew. Or at least, she had a guess. Within minutes, the final invoice printed. Willie signed it, declined the bellhop's help, and walked out the front entrance without looking back. Behind him, the resort lights flickered on as the evening crowd drifted toward candlelit dinners and beach lounges. And somewhere in that suite behind him, Brianna was still standing in a hotel robe, staring at an empty closet, probably still not believing he'd actually done it. But he had. By the time Willie reached the airport hotel near the edge of the island, his phone had already buzzed more than a dozen times. He ignored everyone. It was only after he'd showered and changed into clean clothes, folded his shirt with the same care he'd used packing it 3 days ago, that he sat on the edge of the bed, opened his messages, and started scrolling. The first few were expected. "Are you serious right now? You're being a child. Come back so we can talk like adults." Then came the shift. The slow unraveling. "Willie, this doesn't have to be the end. We've been through too much. It was one stupid moment. Are you really throwing everything away over that?" He didn't reply. "Fine. Be immature. But don't expect me to apologize again when you come crawling back." Then silence for a while. Until reality set in. "They just told me the spa appointment's canceled." "Wait, where are the excursion confirmations? Are you joking right now?" And then the truth finally hit her. "The room isn't paid past tomorrow. They're asking for a credit card." "Everything was in your name? Seriously?" Another pause. And then the tone dropped, panicked now, raw around the edges. "I don't have enough on my card for this place. It's maxed out. How am I supposed to get home? You have the flight info. Please, Willie. Don't leave me like this." He stared at the screen for a moment. Watched the 3 gray dots appear, typing, stopping, typing again. He let them fade. Then typed just 3 words. "Not my problem." And then added one more line. "Figure it out." No punctuation. No anger. Just the truth. He muted the thread, turned off notifications, and slid the phone onto the nightstand. For the first time in months, maybe longer, the silence felt good. Not empty. Not lonely. Just peaceful. He lay back against the pillows, let the AC hum fill the room, and closed his eyes. She had finally lost control. And he had finally taken it back. 2 days passed. Willie was back in Austin, back in his condo, unpacking in slow silence. The air felt heavier than he remembered, or maybe he was just feeling the weight of everything that had collapsed in that suite. He hadn't heard from Brianna again, not directly. But mutual friends had started buzzing. Vague texts. Missed calls. Messages from people he barely spoke to suddenly checking in with strange concern. Then, late one afternoon, a number he didn't recognize lit up his screen. He almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But something told him the answer. "Hey, is this Willie?" a soft voice asked. Female. Nervous. "Yeah. Who is this?" "It's Tasha. Brianna's roommate." He sat up straighter. "Okay. I know this is weird, and you probably don't want to hear from anyone connected to her, but I think you deserve to know something." Willie said nothing. Let her talk. "I didn't know what really happened at the resort until Brianna came home. But the story she's telling people, it's not what you think. She's saying you two had a huge fight, and that you left her there out of spite. That you've been distant for months. That she was basically alone in the relationship." Willie let out a small breath, half laugh. "That tracks. She said it wasn't cheating. That you were already done." "She said that?" he asked, tone flat. "Yeah," Tasha said, pausing. "But I'm calling because this isn't the first time she's twisted things." Then came the part that shifted everything. "She's been seeing someone else. Way before the trip. The guy from your office. You know a Daniel?" Willie's blood went cold. Daniel. Mid-30s. Clean cut. Marketing team. They'd talked casually during lunch breaks, even grabbed beers once or twice after work. Nothing close, but enough to be uncomfortable now. "She said you knew," Tasha continued. "That you two had an arrangement." Willie rubbed his face slowly. "No. No arrangement. No knowledge. I figured, she said. That's why I wanted to say something. I've seen her pull this kind of thing before. Always a victim. Always someone else's fault. Later that night, a new number texted him. Hey, it's Daniel. You and I should talk. About Brianna. They met the next evening at a quiet bar. Daniel looked embarrassed before he even sat down. I had no idea, he said right away. She told me you two were basically roommates. Said you were together for appearances, but that it was done behind the scenes. Willie didn't say much. Just listened. Sipped his drink. Let Daniel bury himself in truth. She said you knew about me. That you were fine with it. Daniel pulled out his phone. I saved the messages. Not trying to prove anything. Just, you should see them. The screen glowed between them. Brianna's name in the chat. The words were undeniable. He's not going to care. He's so emotionally distant, he wouldn't notice if I left tomorrow. I'll tell him after the trip. He's been planning this thing forever. Might as well let him have his little fantasy. Willie stared at the texts, lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't speak. Because in that moment, he realized something deeper than betrayal. He wasn't just cheated on. He'd been played. Daniel slid his phone across the table, and Willie took it without a word. The screen was still lit, Brianna's messages staring back at him like cracks in stained glass. He's been saving for this trip forever. Feels weird going when I'm having these thoughts about us, but whatever. Let him have his little fantasy, then I'll move on after. I mean, come on, might as well get one last luxury vacation out of it, right? Willie scrolled further, hands steady but jaw clenched tight. After this, I'm done pretending. I'll talk to him when we're back, or maybe I'll just ghost and let him figure it out. That last one hit harder than the others. Not just because of the words, but the timing. It was sent the night before they boarded the flight. She had already made the decision. The whole trip had been one long goodbye she hadn't bothered to say out loud. She said those things to you? Willie asked quietly, eyes still on the screen. Daniel nodded. I didn't think twice about it at the time. I believed her. Figured you were some emotionally distant tech guy who didn't really care. Willie's lips curled slightly, not a smile, just a recognition of the story Brianna had spun. The cold boyfriend narrative, crafted to justify every secret. She was good at it, Daniel added, guilt thick in his throat. Willie slid the phone back. Yeah. She was. On the drive home, the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was too sharp, like the air had teeth. Back in his apartment, Willie sat on the couch with the lights off, hands folded, phone face down beside him. The weight of everything hit in layers, like a second betrayal laid underneath the first. She didn't just cheat. She used him. Used his loyalty. Used his silence. Used the way he always tried to be the bigger person. The man who didn't make a scene, who gave people space, who forgave before facts were even clear. She'd treated him like a placeholder. A layover on her way to someone newer, shinier, more exciting. And all that time he'd spent trying to save their relationship, all the effort poured into booking that trip, designing the ring, telling himself she was just going through something, it hadn't been love. It had been denial. He got up, walked to the kitchen, and leaned both hands on the counter, breathing through the ache rising in his chest. He wanted to scream, punch a wall, break something. But all that came was stillness. An empty, hollow kind of stillness. The kind that comes not from heartbreak, but from waking up. 3 days of silence passed. Willie didn't block Brianna, but he didn't respond either. He was done giving her access to the part of him that once believed her. Then, on a Sunday morning, just after he'd come back from the gym, his phone lit up with a new message. Her name. Willie, I didn't want to tell you like this, but I might be pregnant. I'm late. I've been feeling different. A few seconds later, a blurry photo followed. A pregnancy test, positive. Slightly cropped. The lighting off, almost like it had been taken in someone else's bathroom. He stared at it for a moment. Not in panic. Not even surprise. Just disappointment. Because even now, even after everything, she was still playing games. No confirmation. No mention of taking a test earlier. No context. Just a panic grenade tossed into his lap, hoping it might explode. But it didn't. Willie sat down at his desk, pulled the image into Google reverse search, and within seconds, found the exact same photo. A post on a pregnancy forum from 2019. Same angle. Same crop. Same smudge on the countertop. He copied the link, went back to her message, and replied with only two things. A screenshot of the search result. The message, "Nice try." No punctuation. No emotion. Just the quiet, unmistakable sound of a door closing. It took her less than 5 minutes to respond. Okay, fine. I'm not pregnant. But we still need to talk. Willie didn't answer. She kept typing. You're just gonna walk away after 4 years? After everything we built? He stared at the words. Let them sit on the screen. Let her desperation hang. Because the truth was, the thing they'd built? She burned at the second she laughed in his face and said, "It's not what it looks like." At first, it was quiet. She went dark again, probably licking her wounds, maybe testing the waters with someone new. But then, the whispers started. Willie got a message from a mutual friend. Then 2 more. Hey man, not sure if this is true, but Brianna's saying you controlled all the money? Did you really leave her in another country with no way to get home? I heard you pressured her into the relationship. Like, used your position or something? It was surreal. The words didn't sound like anything rooted in the real world. But that was the danger of a lie. It didn't need to be big, just believable enough to plant doubt. According to the version she was spinning now, Willie wasn't just a scorned ex. He was emotionally manipulative. Controlling. Cold. She said he made her ask permission for any purchase. That he gaslit her into staying. That he abandoned her out of punishment when she tried to stand up for herself. It was almost impressive, the speed and scope of her reinvention. Victimhood suited her better than accountability ever had. Then things got worse. A colleague from HR called Willie into a discreet meeting. We received an anonymous concern, they said carefully. Allegations about inappropriate conduct and workplace favoritism involving a former romantic partner. Willie didn't even blink. He knew exactly where it was coming from. She's been contacting people here, he asked. The HR rep gave him a look that said everything without confirming anything. They were required to document the claim. No disciplinary action, just paperwork. But still, it was on record. A box ticked. A file started. That crossed the line. Lying to friends was one thing. Trying to destroy his reputation? That was something else. Willie called a lawyer the same day. He explained everything, what happened at the resort, the messages, the false pregnancy, the smears. The lawyer nodded through it all, calm and methodical. We'll start with a cease and desist, she said. But first, we gather backup. So Willie reached out to Tasha, her former roommate, who was more than willing to put her name behind everything. To Daniel, who felt just as duped and agreed to share screenshots of her manipulation. Even to a mutual friend who had overheard Brianna ranting at brunch about milking this breakup for sympathy. And then, almost as a long shot, he emailed her ex, the one she'd claimed had abandoned her emotionally years ago. At first, the guy didn't respond. Then, 3 days later, he did. The email was short, direct. She did the same thing to me. Lied, cheated, turned everyone against me. I lost friends. Transferred departments just to get away. I'll talk. And just like that, Willie wasn't alone anymore. She had played everyone. 4 years. Now, finally, people were done letting her. The cease and desist went out on a Thursday. Delivered to both her inbox and her last known mailing address, it was short, direct, and legally sound. A warning shot, firm but fair. It detailed the false claims, the workplace interference, the defamation, and the consequences if she didn't stop. Willie didn't feel satisfaction reading it. There was no triumph, no catharsis. Just a dull, steady certainty, this needed to be done. Not to punish her. To protect himself. 2 days later, her final message arrived. It didn't come through text or voicemail, it came as an email. I didn't mean for things to get this far. I never wanted to ruin your life. I was hurt. I felt abandoned and scared and I lashed out. That's not who I am. I'm sorry for exaggerating things and for the way I handled it. I hope one day you can forgive me. He read it twice, not because he didn't understand it, but because it felt like reading a press release. Carefully crafted. Detached. Almost rehearsed. There was no acknowledgement of the lies. No ownership of the manipulation. Just vague emotion and soft regret, the kind you say when you're more sorry for the fallout than the act itself. Willie stared at the blinking cursor at the bottom of the message for a long time. Then he closed the email and blocked her address. That was it. No reply. No farewell. No final words to give her closure. She'd forfeited that right. In the weeks that followed, the silence was no longer unsettling, it was sacred. For the first time in years, Willie had space to think without walking on eggshells or second-guessing someone else's moods. And with that quiet came clarity. He started looking back, not just at the end, but at the beginning. At all the little moments that he'd once chalked up to personality quirks or harmless habits. Moments that, in hindsight, painted a different picture. The times Brianna would forget to mention dinners with male clients. How she never really introduced him to her inner circle, always brushing it off with, "They're weird about couples." The subtle guilt trips when he wanted time for himself. The way her problems always seemed bigger than his, and how every disagreement somehow turned into a referendum on his shortcomings. He remembered how she once said, "You love control too much," when he asked her to be more transparent about finances, after months of covering unexpected charges on his credit card. He'd told himself she was free-spirited. Independent. Fierce. But in reality, she was slippery. Non-committal. Emotionally evasive. And the saddest part? He saw the signs. He felt them. But he wanted the relationship to work more than he wanted to admit the truth. Because he loved her. And sometimes, love makes you defend the person hurting you, just so you don't have to face the pain of admitting they don't love you back the same way. Now, standing in the ruins, he finally understood, the cracks were there all along. He just didn't want to see them. But seeing them now, really seeing them, that was step one in rebuilding something far more important than a relationship. Himself. He started small. Woke up earlier. Hit the gym harder. Stopped skipping meals, stopped checking his phone during workouts. Replaced old routines with new habits, ones that had nothing to do with pleasing anyone else. He signed a lease on a new apartment. Smaller, but sunnier. No echoes of late-night arguments or the ghost of promises that were never kept. He booked a therapist. At first, he thought therapy was for people who didn't know how to handle their emotions. Now, he saw it for what it was, an act of self-respect. A chance to dig deeper, to understand the patterns that led him here, and to build something healthier moving forward. He went out more. Reconnected with friends he hadn't seen in months, some even years. People who didn't want anything from him. People who weren't conditional. Slowly, something shifted. He smiled more. Slept better. His chest didn't feel heavy anymore when he walked into his own home. One night, after cooking dinner in his new kitchen, he sat down with a glass of wine and realized something that stopped him mid-sip. She had taken everything he thought he needed, validation, comfort, the illusion of love. And left him with exactly what he actually needed. Clarity. It came as an email, plain and unexpected, buried between a shipping notification and a newsletter he never subscribed to. Subject line, your message about Brianna. He almost didn't open it. But something about the name caught his eye, Jeremy Langston. Brianna had mentioned him once, in that vague, dismissive tone she used when talking about anything that didn't paint her in a flattering light. My ex? Yeah, he was a manipulative head case. Clingy. Jealous. Toxic. Totally messed up. That was all she'd said. And Willie, back then, had accepted it without question. Trusted her version. Believed that someone who spoke so softly, laughed so easily, couldn't possibly be the villain in her own story. But now, reading Jeremy's name on the screen, he felt the air in the room shift. He clicked. Willie. I wasn't going to respond. I've tried really hard to leave that chapter closed. But after reading what you shared, I felt like I owed it to you, and maybe to myself, to say something. Yes. She did the exact same thing to me. The words blurred for a second, then refocused. At first, it was incredible. She made me feel like I was the only person in the world. Said all the right things. Gave me all the attention I didn't know I was craving. And then, slowly, it changed. The gaslighting. The secrets. The sudden mood swings. And when I started asking questions, when I stopped being blindly supportive, she flipped the script. Told our friends I was unstable. That I was possessive. Accused me of things I never said, never did. I lost 2 close friendships. And eventually, my job, because she took her stories to the wrong ears at my company. She spun a narrative so carefully that even I started to question myself. But I wasn't crazy. I was just being groomed into silence. Willie leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on the screen, but no longer reading, just absorbing. Letting it wash over him like a bitter kind of validation. You weren't the first, man. And I'm sorry you had to go through it. But at least now, you know. You're not crazy either. That line hit harder than he expected. Because somewhere, deep down, despite the therapy and the distance and the resolve, a part of him had still been wondering, what if it really was me? What if I wasn't enough? But now, he saw the pattern. This wasn't about a failed relationship. It was a cycle. She'd done this before. She'd left someone else ruined and walked away untouched. And he, just like Jeremy, had been her next clean slate. It wasn't heartbreak. It was strategy. Willie felt a cold shiver slide down his spine. Not from fear, but from understanding. She wasn't broken. She was calculated. She didn't stumble into betrayal. She walked into it with a plan. And all the things he thought were special, the way she'd looked at him, spoken to him, touched his arm when she laughed, those weren't moments of love. They were rehearsed. Worn-in tricks. Emotional sleight of hand. He hadn't been chosen. He'd been used. A stepping stone to her next upgrade. And now? She'd moved on again. Rewriting the script. Making herself the protagonist in a story where everyone else was the villain. But he wouldn't be in the sequel. Not this time. He replied to Jeremy, thanked him, and closed the laptop. And just like that, the book slammed shut. She texted him one last time. You really threw away 4 years over one mistake? Willie stared at the message, then locked the screen without responding. Because he realized something in that moment, something sharp, and true, and final. Maybe that mistake was the only honest thing she ever did. Everything else? The affection, the promises, the plans, all carefully constructed. But that, the lie exposed in a hotel room, wrapped in crumpled sheets, that was real. And if the only honest thing she gave him was betrayal, what exactly was he trying to hold on to? Now, he wants to ask you. If someone betrays you once, really, deeply, would you ever trust them again? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story. Because someone out there might be living the version of this story right now, and your words might be exactly what they need to hear. Willie didn't walk away from everything bitter, He walked away better. Stronger. Wiser. The kind of man who now understood that not everyone who says I love you means it. That love without loyalty is just performance. That you can give someone every ounce of your heart and they'll still choose to trample it if they never planned to protect it in the first place. But he didn't let it harden him. He didn't become cold, or cruel, or cynical. He became clear. Clear on what he deserved. Clear on who he was. Clear on what he would never tolerate again. Because heartbreak doesn't have to break you. Sometimes, it's the very thing that reveals the parts of you worth fighting for. And to any man out there walking through betrayal, wondering if he's weak for hurting or stupid for trusting, you're not. You're human. And your dignity, that quiet, unshakable voice inside you that says, I won't let this define me, is your armor. Don't trade that for a one-night explanation. Don't sell it cheap for closure that doesn't come. Don't bend just to keep someone who would have broken you anyway. You don't have to destroy them to win. You just have to not destroy yourself trying to keep them. Let them lie. Let them twist the story. Let them play the victim. You walk forward, with your integrity intact, and your head held high. And if the world asks why you walked away without looking back, just tell them this. Sometimes the trash doesn't take itself out. Sometimes you have to carry it to the curb, and never look back.